see you guys in the dark.
Early one evening last March, my best friend saw my name pop up in a text message notification on her phone. The message, which appeared to come from my Gmail account, read, "Felt a bit sad today about how I never made any friends at Emory during my time there. Not one. God, I'm a loser. All I've got is my hair, LOL. She called me as soon as she got home from work. Are you okay?" "Yeah, why?" "Everything's fine," I answered her. She told me about the text message, but even as she spoke, we realized what had happened. I said it's Danny. My cyber stalker had struck once again, this time with a spot on impersonation of me and my neurosis. Danny, which is not his real name, has stalked and harassed me, online and off, for almost 15 years, more than half my life at this point. He's used a variety of methods to do so: phone, text, email, Facebook, and other social media, updating his tactics with every advance in technology. In the last 3 years, he has also sent dozens, and possibly hundreds of defamatory letters, emails, Facebook, and Twitter messages about me to my family, my friends, employers, professional organizations, and politic offices, including the State Attorney General of New York. I know because he sent me a copy of the letters. By now, I was used to ignoring Danny's harassments and advising others to do the same, but this was different, more serious than what I had endured before. It looked like Danny had stolen my identity and was now posing as me to my friends online. Had he hacked my accounts? I was terrified of the havoc that he would wreak with my personal information suddenly at his disposal. I immediately called Apple and started digging through Google's help pages to figure out what had happened. It turned out my accounts were secure, and Danny hadn't actually hacked anything. I changed my passwords anyways. He was spoofing my Gmail, using a software program that let him impersonate me online. Spoofing is easy to do, and is often used in phishing scams. Since he was using a third-party system, Apple couldn't stop him. The rep had told me this. Neither could Google. If I wanted to end Danny's extended campaign to make my life miserable once and for all, I'd have to figure out how myself. Danny and I met at camp in 2001, when I was 12 years old, and he was just a couple years older than me. We became friends. We would talk occasionally during the school year. Our conversations frequently involved me reading him excerpts from Cosmopolitan Guide to Horoscopes, a book that I was obsessed with at the time. But soon he was calling practically every single day. I ignored his phone calls, finding it easier to ghost as a self-centered teen than confront him directly. He didn't take that hint. I eventually blocked his number, like everyone in the early angst. I was a devoted user of AOL Instant Messenger, and at some point must have given Danny my screen name. We chatted on AIM on and off through high school until I blocked him there too. When I got a Facebook account in 2006, he found me once again, and not wanting to be rude, I accepted his friend request. He often sent rambling accounts of his day-to-day life. I usually didn't respond, but sometimes I messaged back if I was bored or lonely. I didn't think much of Danny's behavior until one evening during my sophomore year of college. I was leaving the library when I saw Danny standing outside. He handed me the latest Red Hot Chili Peppers CD and asked if we could eat dinner together. I panicked. I hadn't seen Danny since middle school and didn't want to see him now, but I also didn't want to hurt his feelings and felt touched by his gift. I took him to the cafeteria, made awkward conversation until I faked an excuse, and then I left. After that incident, I cut off contact, figuring his fixation would dwindle with time, but his Facebook messages only seemed to increase. An almost daily barrage of friendly, if disjointed missives responded to my updates or providing commentary on his political beliefs, job hunt, and other aspects of his life. The last time that I talked to him was in 2012. His messages had ramped up to maniacal rate, every few hours for about 3 days straight, unreciprocated, and with no end in sight. I caved. I sent him a message asking him to just stop messaging me or I would have to block him. Okay, good luck on your quest, he wrote back 3 minutes later. Huh, I thought. That was easy. Then suddenly he sent me 3 more angry messages in quick succession. I blocked him on Facebook. That's when everything had changed. Instead of the typical ramblings, Danny started calling me names, insulting my Jewish nose, making thinly veiled threats to ruin my career. I filtered out his emails and blocked his messages, but some communications always managed to slip through as Danny contrived new usernames and methods to harass me all the time. In 2014, he sent my parents a letter detailing his recent activities. A number of federal government agencies in Washington, D.C., New York, in addition with a number of journalism associates that have been contacted to maintain the integrity of internet communication, to uphold ethical journalistic responsibilities, and uphold ethics in the journalism industry, he wrote. If this ruined Ronnie's career in journalism, that is personally not my responsibility. She'll have to deal with the consequences. Later I got emails from him telling me he had submitted formal complaints to the FTC and FCC, as well as both agencies. Official responded to him. He also contacted the New York State Attorney General. You sure did create a bad reputation with federal government. Please use words and the internet responsibly, he wrote in one email to me. I really fear for you in journalism, because you could get in a lot of legal trouble. Your reputation is not exactly the best. I was now fielding multiple inquiries about him each month, from employers, acquaintances, friends, and many others. I'd explained the situation, advised them to just block and ignore all of his messages. Most people were very understanding, but it was embarrassing to explain this situation, especially to my employers that I was trying to impress. 2 years had passed before I finally decided to take legal action. Maybe it was weird that I waited so long. My friends and family had been encouraging me to go to the police for many years, but by that point, I regarded Danny as an annoying fact of life, the hole-dwelling rodent in a decade-plus game of whack-a-mole. And anyways, I didn't want to get Danny in any trouble. He obviously had a problem, and would likely be better served by therapy than jail time. Besides, I had my doubts about what the police could do. A few months earlier, I had watched as a couple of officers successfully dissuaded my neighbor from reporting the physical assault she had just suffered at the hands of her boyfriend. If they couldn't acknowledge the bruises that were covering her arms, neck, and legs, I didn't have any confidence in their ability to see what Danny was doing to me. But impersonating me, by spoofing accounts, was way too much. Danny had also started harassing my friend, probably after intuiting our best friend status via social media. He had sent spoofed emails, called her ugly, a slut, while pretending to be me, or one of our friends. She got messages alerting her he was trying to hack into her Gmail and social media. Someone like Danny sent her an anonymous email using a service called Gorilla Mail with "Ronnie is not your friend" in the subject line. Body of email: "Who do you think is harassing you on the net?" Is another message that had showed up on text on her phone, apparently sent from my email addresses. He urged her to put up more photos on Facebook, please. I'm very bored. I definitely have to find a way to end this before it escalates yet again. When my boyfriend strangled me in 2002, I managed to escape by jumping out of a second-floor window. At the time, we had been dating for about 3 years. My fall ended up breaking my ankle, but I was able to run to my neighbors and call 911. If my will to live hadn't outweighed his will to kill me, I would have been dead. We had stayed together for several years after that assault. We lived together and had a child. Throughout our relationship, the abuse had continued. In 2006, I was preparing to spend Christmas with our baby daughter and my parents. One day I had looked up and saw all the holes that he left all over the house, from where my boyfriend had punched the walls. That's when I decided to just up and leave. It took a few more years for us to split. We finally did in 2009, but that wasn't the end of my story. He has spent the last 11 years stalking me and my daughter, who is now a teenager. Over that time, I have taken multiple protective orders against my ex. I have moved between 4 U.S. states, even had my identity legally changed with the help of a domestic violence service program about a decade ago. The Guardian has reviewed the police reports and citations, court transcripts, disability findings, emails, text messages, and audio recordings to verify the account of the relationship and the aftermath. I had considered leaving the country, but I didn't want to. The United States is my home. I honestly do not remember if he was penalized on paper for violating protective orders. The abuse I was suffering during and after the relationship has left me with physical and mental disabilities, including a head injury, which resulted in persistent memory problems, and post-traumatic stress disorder, a type of PTSD that comes from enduring long-term trauma. I suffer from episodes in which I lose consciousness due to anxiety. 11 years is definitely a long time to stalk someone. The justice system has done very little to protect me, and sometimes has put me further in harm's way. Sadly, the repeated failures of the criminal justice and family court systems, technically in place for my safety, are very common. They basically left me to fight for myself and my daughter without the support that I need to get rid of my abuser. I called the police after multiple other instances of my ex becoming violent with me, long before the split-up, which usually resulted in a verbal warning or a citation on his part. Since he assaulted me in 2002, my ex has spent brief periods in jail, and a psychiatric hospital as well, but has always gotten out and been able to find me. The last time my ex physically had assaulted me was 2009. He punched and attempted to strangle me, which led me to stay at a shelter right after the attack. During my new life that I tried to build, far away from my abuser, he has appeared through some combination of bureaucratic mismanagement and law enforcement officers failing to abide by practices meant to safeguard the survivors of intimate partner violence. Several years ago, one law enforcement officer had revealed to him that I changed my identity and address. After the Guardian, who is a court-appointed person who is meant to represent a child's best interest, assigned to their child's visitation case, recommended a well-being check. This compromise of privacy was both a flaw in the system, intended to protect me, and simply the way things work, sometimes when the guardians of that system don't prioritize victim safety. It made my ex remain on my trail for a very long time. When coronavirus hit, I had finally felt safer than I had in many years. He didn't contact me in quite some time. It had been more than a year since I had moved from the East Coast to Hawaii. Just roughly over a year and a half, which should have been a decent amount of time for someone to relocate and keep the location secret. Travel restrictions and lockdown procedures meant that my ex couldn't necessarily be traveling anytime soon. And although I disliked having to wear a mask in public, I appreciated the anonymity that it provided. Nobody can recognize me then. I'm scared for when they say, "Okay, you don't have to wear a mask anymore." The feeling of security had disappeared when I got a text from an unfamiliar number back in April. The text message, which has been reviewed by the Guardian, contained my home address at the time, nothing else. Nobody could verify who sent it, but the Guardian does believe that it was my ex. Around that time, I had received text messages from yet another unfamiliar number. The sender was identified as Betty, which I knew to be the name of the woman that my ex had married sometime after we broke up. One of those text messages happened to have a callback number. When I tried the number, Betty had answered, but she denied sending me any of the text messages. We happen to be no longer in contact, but Betty told me that her marriage has also turned abusive, and that she believes the ex was headed to Hawaii back in May. This pandemic has become more of an obstacle than a protection for me. Courthouses, operations were limited, and advocates that had been previously speaking to me has gone silent. They're probably overwhelmed responding to situations arising from this pandemic. All I can do is relocate once again to a place that I would describe as a very private but temporary place. I'm tired of running, but with the pandemic straining legal and advocacy resources, I feel very trapped, unable to ever truly let my guard down. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.